not approximately. Exactly. Most people can't. Most people work 40, 50 hours a week, bring home a respectable income, and by the 28th of the month, it's gone, evaporated, like it was never there. And here's what nobody's telling you about that. That is not an income problem. It is an architecture problem. See, the 1%, the people who quietly, patiently, almost boringly build real wealth while everyone else drowns in anxiety and overdraft fees, they don't earn money differently from you. Not really. Not in any way that matters. What they do differently is this. They decide where every dollar goes before it has a chance to disappear before. I've been handling money since I was 6 years old, selling gum door to door in Omaha, and I've sat across the table from brilliant men, doctors, lawyers, engineers who died broke. Not because they didn't earn enough, because they had no system, no architecture, no fortress to protect what they built. And I've watched ordinary men and women, school teachers, mail carriers, factory workers, build fortunes that outlasted them, left money to their grandchildren, slept every night of their lives without worry. The difference wasn't intelligence. It was never intelligence. It was structure. Today, I'm going to walk you through the exact framework, what I call the fortress blueprint, that the top 1% use to manage money. It's a 4-bucket system. It's simple. It's almost insultingly simple. And most people will hear it today and do nothing with it. Don't be that person. Stay with me through this entire video, because what I'm going to share with you in the next 26 minutes has the potential to completely rearrange how you think about your next paycheck. You know, Charlie Munger, and I miss him every single day, used to lean back in that old chair of his and say something that I've never forgotten. He'd say, "Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome." What Charlie meant was this: if your financial system rewards impulsive spending, you will spend impulsively every month without fail. But if your system is designed to reward patience and deliberate allocation, you will build wealth automatically without needing willpower, without needing to be particularly brilliant. Automatically, in 75 years of investing, I have never, not once, met a person who built serious, durable, lasting wealth through willpower alone. Not one willpower is exhaustible. It runs dry on hard days, on stressful weeks, on months when life throws something terrible at you. Systems don't run dry, systems just run. And what I'm about to share with you is a system, a blueprint, a fortress. Here's how it works. Every dollar you earn gets divided into 4 deliberate buckets. The proportions matter more than the amounts. And the discipline inside each bucket is what separates the patient investor from the anxious speculator. Bucket 1, 50% goes to what I call the bedrock, your essential living expenses. The non-negotiables. Bucket 2, 25% goes to the growth engine, the compounding ammunition that builds real wealth while you sleep. Bucket 3, 15% goes to the dry powder vault, your stability armor, your fortress wall. Bucket 4, 10% goes to the joy reserve, the sustainable fuel that keeps the whole fortress from becoming a prison. Now, each of these deserves a deep conversation because the percentages are easy. What's hard and what nobody teaches you is what most people get catastrophically wrong inside each bucket. Let's start where every fortress either stands or falls, the bedrock, 50% essentials. The first bucket is the foundation of this entire blueprint, and I want you to treat it accordingly. 50% of your take-home income, not gross take-home, what actually lands in your account. This is the bedrock: housing and rent, groceries, utilities, essential transportation, the things that keep a roof over your head, food on your table, and your lights on. These are your non-negotiables. These form the base of your fortress walls. Now, here's where most people go wrong, and I mean catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. They let something called lifestyle creep turn their bedrock into quicksand, you know what I mean? They get a raise, good for them, and suddenly the apartment upgrades, the car payment climbs, the subscription list grows like a vine, the dinners out become dinners at nicer places. And before they know it, instead of 50% on essentials, they're spending 70, 80, sometimes 90 cents of every dollar on things they've convinced themselves are necessities. That is not a foundation, that is a financial sinkhole. A sinkhole. See, the speculator treats lifestyle upgrades as rewards for hard work. And I understand that impulse, I genuinely do, but the patient investor treats lifestyle inflation as enemy number one, because every dollar that leaks into an inflated lifestyle is a dollar that can never compound, never. So how do you hold the bedrock at 50%? 3 disciplines. The first is ruthless cost reduction, not on small things. People waste enormous mental energy worrying about their daily coffee, and that's a distraction. Attack your biggest expenses, your housing, your car. Did you know you can renegotiate your rent? Landlords almost always prefer a reliable, long-standing tenant over 3 months of vacancy and a new tenant search. Call your landlord. Ask for a reduced rate in exchange for a longer lease commitment or on-time payment history. The worst they say is no. And some people have saved $200-300 a month from a single conversation. A single conversation. Now, house hacking, this is something more people should know about. If you own or rent a property with a spare room, an in-law suite, or a basement unit, renting that space to a reliable tenant can dramatically reduce or even eliminate your housing costs. I still live in the same house I bought in 1958 for $31,500. People think I'm eccentric. I think I'm rational. I've never needed a mansion. I need a home. There's a difference as for cars. Cars, one of the great silent wealth destroyers of the American middle class. A car is not an investment. It is a cost, a pure depreciating, ongoing cost. Buy reliable, buy used, drive it until the wheels fall off. That is not poverty. That is how you keep money that would otherwise disappear into loan interest and depreciation curves and lease payments that buy you nothing permanent, nothing. The second discipline is the 7-day rule before any non-essential purchase. Anything that doesn't belong in the Bedrock wait 7 full days. If you still want it after a week, perhaps it merits the expense. 9 times out of 10, you'll have forgotten you wanted it. The craving passes, the impulse fades, and the money stays in the fortress. The speculator buys on impulse. Every time the investor asks one question first: does this purchase move me closer to freedom or further away? The third discipline is value over brand. Look, I've never in my life bought something because of the logo on the label. I buy function, I buy durability, I buy reliability. The wealthy, the genuinely wealthy, they consume quietly, plainly, efficiently. When you're buying a brand name, you're not buying quality, you're buying someone else's marketing budget. You're paying for the advertisement that convinced you to need it, and there's one more filter I want to introduce here. Before any discretionary purchase inside the Bedrock, ask yourself one simple question: does this genuinely improve my daily life? Not how it looks to others, not what it signals. Does it functionally, tangibly improve your actual experience? If the answer isn't a clear, immediate yes, put it back, defend the Bedrock at 50% ferociously. Because if this foundation cracks, if lifestyle creep invades this bucket, nothing else in the blueprint can hold. Nothing. The growth engine, 25% growth assets. Now we arrive at the bucket most people either skip entirely, approach with recklessness, or most dangerously of all, confused with gambling, 25% of your take-home income. The growth engine, your compounding ammunition, this is the money that works for you while you sleep, while you eat breakfast, while you're at your daughter's recital on a Tuesday evening. This money is quietly, patiently, mechanically multiplying itself in the background. And if you build this engine correctly and leave it alone long enough, it eventually produces more than your job does. Charlie used to say something that I think about often. He'd say, the big money isn't in the buying and the selling, it's in the waiting, and this bucket, this growth engine, is where that waiting turns into wealth. So what goes into the growth engine? Let me walk you through the assets that actually matter, and one that absolutely does not. First, low-cost index funds, particularly an S&P 500 index fund. Look, I've spent a lifetime studying individual businesses. I've read thousands of annual reports. I've analyzed balance sheets and cash flows and management structures for 70-plus years. MC28, and you know what I tell most ordinary investors: just buy the index, buy the whole market. A low-cost S&P 500 index fund gives you ownership in the 500 greatest businesses in America, not a bet on one horse, a bet on the entire race. And I've lived long enough through the Great Depression, through wars, through crises, through every manner of economic chaos, to tell you that the race always moves forward. The line goes up even when individual years are brutal, even when the headlines scream catastrophe. People thought I'd lost my mind, but I hadn't lost anything. I understood something they didn't. Fear is temporary. The underlying value of great businesses is permanent. Second, real estate and REITs. Real estate is one of the oldest wealth-building instruments in human history, oldest If you can't afford direct property, real estate investment trusts, REITs, give you fractional ownership in income-producing real estate without requiring you to fix a broken furnace at midnight. They pay dividends, they compound, they provide genuine, tangible protection against the slow erosion of inflation. And in a world where the dollar is always quietly losing purchasing power, owning real assets is a form of armor. Third, high-income skills. Now, this one isn't on most people's investment lists, but it should sit at the very top. The best investment I ever made in my entire life wasn't Coca-Cola. It wasn't American Express. It wasn't any stock or bond or piece of property. It was a Dale Carnegie public speaking course. Cost me $100 when I was a young man. Real money back then. And that $100 might be worth millions to me today in terms of the relationships it built, the doors it opened, the opportunities it made possible. You cannot tax a skill. You cannot steal it. You cannot take it from someone in a market crash. It compounds like money does, sometimes faster. Fourth, online businesses and side ventures that generate cash flow. If you have entrepreneurial energy, and some of you do, building a small income generating asset outside your main employment is one of the most powerful things you can do. A small online business, a consulting practice, a creative enterprise that earns even modest recurring revenue. That revenue reinvested consistently adds fuel to the growth engine at a pace that salary alone rarely matches. Fifth, individual stocks, but chosen carefully and held with patience. If you want to own individual businesses, do it strictly within your circle of competence. My mentor, Benjamin Graham, taught me something that has never left me. A stock is not a lottery ticket. It is a fractional ownership stake in a real business with employees, customers, competitive advantages, debts, and a future. Would you buy an entire business without understanding how it makes money, without knowing whether it has a durable competitive moat? The speculator buys tickers. They chase momentum. They buy whatever's on the front page of the financial news. The investor buys businesses. There's a gap between those two behaviors as wide as the Grand Canyon, wide. And then there's cryptocurrency. I'll address this directly and briefly. Rat poison. I've said it for years and I'll say it again. Cryptocurrency produces nothing. It generates no earnings, no dividends, no economic output, no goods or services. It is a pure speculation on what the next person will pay. That's not investing. That's a game of musical chairs where someone always ends up without a seat, and that someone is almost never the person who started the game almost never. Now, how do you actually build and maintain the growth engine? 3 disciplines, monthly automated transfers. On payday, automatically, without human intervention, a portion of your income moves directly to your investment account before you see it. Before your brain has any opportunity to decide it wants something else, the speculator saves what's left over after spending. The investor automates savings first and spends what remains. That one reversal, that single mechanical change is responsible for more personal fortunes than any stock pick in history. Tax-advantaged accounts. In the United States, your Roth IRA and your 401k are among the most quietly extraordinary gifts the government has given ordinary investors. The tax-free compound growth inside a Roth IRA, money that you contribute after taxes, grows for decades and can be withdrawn in retirement without a cent owed to the government, is an instrument that most people dramatically underutilize. Max these contributions before anything else. Reinvest every dividend, every single one. Dividend reinvestment is where the compounding chain reaches its full strength. Benjamin Graham wrote about this extensively in The Intelligent Investor. When you receive a dividend and spend it, you break one link in the chain. When you reinvest it, you add one. Over 20 years, over 30 years. The difference between those two behaviors is not a small number. It is generational. And for most people, a 3-fund portfolio is the simplest, most effective structure you'll ever need. A total U.S. market fund, a total international fund, and a bond fund calibrated to your timeline and risk tolerance. Boring, absolutely extraordinarily effective over a long horizon without question. Here's a question I want you to sit with right now in this exact moment. What is your money actually doing tonight while you watch this? If the answer is sitting in a checking account earning nothing, we have real work to do. Real work. The patient investor sleeps well at night. The anxious speculator never sleeps at all. The rye powder vault 15% stability. We've built the foundation. We've ignited the growth engine. But there's a third bucket that most financial content completely ignores, and without it, every fortress eventually falls. Every single one, 15% of your take-home income. The dry powder vault, your stability armor, I call it dry powder because that's precisely what it is, ammunition that stays ready to deploy when genuine opportunity appears or when life without warning falls apart. And in a long life, both will happen. I can promise you that. Most people call this an emergency fund. I want you to think about it differently. An emergency fund sounds reactive, defensive, something you build hoping you'll never need it. The dry powder vault is something else entirely. It's a strategic asset, a weapon, the moat around your fortress. How much should you keep in it? 5 months of your essential monthly baseline, not your total spending, your bedrock spending, housing, groceries, utilities, basic transportation. Calculate that monthly number, multiply it by 5. That's your target. Where does it live? 3 non-negotiable rules. Accessible within 24 hours, not locked inside a certificate of deposit with a penalty for early withdrawal. Not in the stock market where it might be down 40% the exact moment you need it. Liquid ready in your hand within a day, zero risk. This money is not there to grow. This money is there to survive. If you put it in equities and the market drops the same week, your furnace dies or you lose your job, you've lost twice, once in the investment, once in the timing. Life has a cruel habit of delivering disasters at the worst possible moments. The vault protects you from that. High-yield savings account, a HESA. While the dry powder vault isn't there to compound aggressively, there's no reason not to earn something meaningful on it. Current rates on high-yield savings accounts are dramatically superior to traditional savings accounts at major banks. Your dry powder should earn while it waits, not grow explosively, just earn. How do you build this vault? The paycheck sweep. On payday, before you touch anything else, an automatic transfer moves 15% into your dry powder account, not after bills. Not after groceries, first. Non-negotiable, always first. The replacement promise. The moment you draw from the vault for any reason, emergency or otherwise, you make a solemn binding commitment to fully restore it before resuming any other financial activity. The vault must remain at 5 months always. That level is the floor, not the ceiling. Roundup apps and cashback. Small, consistent additions compound over time in ways people consistently underestimate. Every cashback dollar from your credit card, every rounded up transaction from an automated savings app, feed it directly into the vault. These small streams eventually become significant buffers. Significant. Now, here's the thing about the dry powder vault that most people miss entirely, the thing that most financial commentary never mentions. It's not primarily about surviving emergencies. It's about something far more powerful. It's about your psychology. I remember 2008. I remember sitting in my office while the market was shedding 30, 40% of its value, watching years of paper gains evaporate in weeks. The speculator, the person with no vault, no dry powder, nothing, was in full panic mode, forced to sell assets at the worst possible moment, forced to liquidate holdings at fire sale prices just to cover basic living expenses because they had no buffer, no protection. Locked out of the greatest buying opportunity of a generation, unable to act because they had nothing in reserve. The investor with a full vault slept, waited, watched the sale. And when everyone else was sprinting for the exits, they walked calmly toward the entrance. They bought American. They added to positions at prices they'd remember their entire lives. That is the real power of the dry powder vault, not just survival, not just protection. The ability to be completely rational when the world around you is completely irrational. And when you can be rational while the world is irrational, that is the most powerful competitive advantage any investor on earth can possess, the most powerful. The Joy Reserve 10% rewards. We've covered 3/4 of the Fortress Blueprint, and now we arrive at the bucket that makes the entire system survivable for a human being, 10%. The Joy Reserve. I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, and you're probably smiling, that an old man who has lived in the same house since 1958 and drives a car that's 10 years old is going to lecture you about spending money on things you enjoy. Fair. That's completely fair, but here's what 95 years has taught me that I want to be absolutely clear about. Any system that demands permanent deprivation will eventually collapse. Any fortress that never allows its residents to breathe will produce a revolt from within. The great enemy of long-term financial discipline isn't temptation from outside, it's burnout from inside. The 1% don't deprive themselves. What they do is allocate intentionally, deliberately, guilt-free. The joy reserve is 10% of your income designated for the experiences, pleasures, and relationships that make the fortress worth building in the first place. On vacations with people you love, hobbies that restore your energy and remind you who you are outside of your obligations, social experiences that deepen the relationships that matter. Gifts for the people who helped you along the way. 3 rules govern this bucket. First, keep it completely separate. Open a dedicated account, call it your joy jar. When the money is there, it is yours. Spend it guilt-free, completely guilt-free, MC62. But when it's gone, when the joy jar is empty, it's gone. You do not raid the bedrock. You do not tap the growth engine. You do not touch the dry powder vault. You wait for next month's allocation. That constraint is what gives the spending its psychological safety. Second, the guilt-free strategy. The entire purpose of the joy reserve is psychological permission. Here's something I've noticed over decades. The speculator, the person whose finances are in chaos, feels guilty every time they spend money on something pleasurable because deep down some part of them knows the financial house isn't in order. That guilt colors everything. Every dinner out, every trip, every small indulgence carries a shadow. The patient investor with a full vault, a firing growth engine, and a solid bedrock spends their joy reserve with complete, uncomplicated freedom because every other bucket is full, protected, and growing. That guilt-free spending is the reward for discipline. It's the dividend that patience pays to itself, and it is deeply satisfying in a way that impulsive spending never quite is. Never. Third, sustainable discipline. The joy reserve exists to prevent financial burnout. Burnout is real. It's as real in personal finance as it is in athletics or creative work. Sustained deprivation triggers rebellion. And when financial discipline breaks, when the dam finally cracks, it rarely cracks in a controlled way. It usually cracks catastrophically. People who deny themselves for months and then snap tend to spend in a way that undoes a great deal of careful work. The joy reserve prevents that. It is the pressure relief valve on the fortress walls. Here's a question worth sitting with. What are the 2 or 3 experiences that genuinely, without any performance, without any audience, fill you with real joy? Not what you think you should enjoy, not what your neighbors are spending on, what actually restores you. Put those things in the joy reserve, let the rest go. The fortress doesn't need to fund everything. It just needs to fund what actually matters to you. Well, let's step back for a moment and look at the whole blueprint from above. 50% the bedrock, the unbreakable foundation of your fortress: housing, groceries, utilities, transportation, defended with absolute discipline against the silent invasion of lifestyle creep. 25% the growth engine, your compounding ammunition, index funds, quality businesses, real estate, high-income skills, income-generating ventures, all of it building real durable wealth in the background while you live your life. 15% the dry powder vault, your stability armor, 5 months of essential baseline, liquid safe, and psychologically transformative, the moat that makes your fortress impenetrable. 10% the joy reserve, the sustainable fuel, the human dividend, the reason you're building all of this in the first place. Now, I want to address the most common objection I hear when I share this framework, because I know some of you are sitting there right now thinking I can't allocate like that. My expenses are too high. This doesn't work for my situation. Here's my honest answer. If your essential expenses already consume more than 50% of your income, the framework isn't broken. The bedrock is broken, and the solution isn't to abandon the blueprint. The solution is to reduce the bedrock until it fits house hacking, downsizing, renegotiating, buying used instead of new, taking on a skill that earns more. Hard choices, hard ones, but consider the alternative. The speculator spends 80% on essentials, makes irregular and emotional investments when they feel inspired, panics during every market downturn, has no vault, no dry powder, no buffer, and wonders every year why they're not getting ahead. Every year, the patient investor defends the bedrock at 50%, automates the growth engine monthly, maintains the vault religiously, rewards themselves sustainably, and over 20 years, the gap between those two people becomes a chasm that cannot be bridged, not by luck, not by a sudden windfall, not by anything. I've watched this happen with my own eyes across 7 decades of investing. Ordinary people, average incomes, patience, systematic, consistent behavior. Retiring with more than they ever believed possible, not because they were gifted, because they had a system and they protected it. Charlie Munger put it perfectly, as he usually did. He said, "It is remarkable how much long-term advantage we have gotten by trying to be consistently not stupid instead of trying to be very intelligent, not brilliant, not lucky, not at the right place at the right time, just consistently not stupid, patient, systematic, fortress building, $1, 1 month, one automated transfer at a time. Build the fortress quietly. The wealth will speak for itself eventually." Before we close, I need to be clear about something, and I mean it sincerely. Everything shared here at Elite Money's Mindset is for educational and entertainment purposes only. I'm not your financial advisor. I'm not licensed to give personalized investment advice. Every person's situation, their taxes, their income, their obligations, their timeline is different. Before making any significant financial decision, please consult with a qualified financial professional who knows your specific circumstances, not a legal formality. That's genuine advice from someone who has seen what happens when people don't get proper counsel for their unique situation. Now, I want to leave you with something real before you go. At 95 years old, I think about wealth differently than I did at 30 or 50 or even 70. And what I've come to understand, what decades of observing people have confirmed for me, is that wealth isn't about the number in your account. It never was. It's about what that number represents. It represents options, choices, the ability to say no to the things you don't want, and a clear, unhurried yes to the things you do. The Fortress Blueprint 50-25-15-10 isn't a magic formula, it's a decision. A daily, monthly, annual decision to treat your money as the serious, finite, precious resource that it is. To protect your future self from the very natural and very human impulses of your present self. Every great fortress in history was built one stone at a time. One stone, no single stone is impressive. You could hold one in your hand and it would mean nothing, but stack enough of them deliberately, consistently, over enough years, and you have something that outlasts storms, outlasts market crashes, outlasts the noise of every panic cycle and hype cycle and fear cycle that comes around. That's what I want for you. Not wealth so you can display it. Not wealth so you can impress anyone. Wealth so you can sleep. Wealth so you can wake up in the morning without that low, quiet hum of financial anxiety that I've watched wear good people down for their entire adult lives. Wealth so your family is protected, not just financially, but psychologically from the fear of uncertainty. Because here's what real wealth actually feels like. It's boring. It's automated transfers and index funds and high-yield savings accounts and guilt-free vacations on a budget. It doesn't look impressive from the outside, but you know what is impressive? What is genuinely remarkable? Waking up at 60, at 70, at 80, knowing the fortress is standing, knowing the vault is full, knowing the growth engine has been running quietly for 20 years and has built something that will take care of people you love. That's what impressive looks like from the inside. Start the blueprint, start it with what you have, even if it's imperfect, even if the percentages aren't quite right yet, even if you have to begin at 40% bedrock and build from there, begin. The best time to build a fortress was 30 years ago. The second best time, as it always is right now. If any of this has given you something real, something you'll actually use on your next payday, do me one favor, hit that like button and subscribe to Elite Money Mindset. We do this every week. Calm, rational, patient, fortress-building content. No hype, no shortcuts, no promises that don't hold over time, just the timeless principles that actually work. I'll see you in the next one. Sleep well.